One day, Thomas, Percy, and Toby, Mavis, and Daisy were resting in their sheds when the Fat Controller arrived. Thomas puffed away to meet Edward. Meanwhile, at Ellsbridge Docks, Tencent was working with his best friend Sunshine, and he was switching the tugs too, but smaller than Tencent. Top Hat was helping him too. They were suddenly interrupted by Cheryl Blasted from the Warrior, Big Mac, who were the strong tugs in the big city port, and they were pulling a strange barge. Then Thomas and Edward arrived. Bill Ben unvished, they went off happily. Meanwhile, at Farquhar, Mavis is working hard as she could do as she is charge of the stone trucks there, and when Toby was busy, or there too, many trucks for him, managed by himself, she's allowed to bring the local train down to Farquhar. Early next morning, the Zigzags and the Star Tugs were called by Captain Star and Captain Zero for the special information. Dolan was the new tugboat and was owned by the Island of Soda. All the tugs and engines don't like him because he was rude to them. Near the China Clay, the line crosses a line, and the crossing had no gates. The line that led to the farm, which made the butter and supplies of eggs and milk to shops in the town. That morning, the farmer had difficulty starting the lorry. At last he did it, but the lorry jerked along as in the fields at starts. The farmer was worried about his loads of milk, butter, and eggs. The lorry was lurching across the road, and back of the wheels were clear when the engines making like a noise and like a tired sheep and stopped. The back of the lorry was lurching and out over the railway line. The farmer struggled to start again, but it would not go. He was just going down to the telephone to help when a train approaching. Mavis saw Lloyd coming towards her. But she couldn't know that the lorry's driver was at the island, the last thing he expected to see the train. Thomas wasn't going fast. When he saw the lorry, he set his brakes hard, but he couldn't stop. Much too fast, the lorry approached the corner. Too late, the driver realized it was sharper than he was expected. He swerved to the motor. He saw Mavis halfway across the road. He braked hard and swung the wheel, but he was too late. Thomas hit the lorry with a loud crash, forcing the blown spun lorry around, and splinters of wood were everywhere, and eggs, butter, and milk were captured all over Thomas. The driver made sure that Thomas wasn't hurt, then stood back and surveyed the mess and began to laugh. Both the driver and fireman tried hard to heat up Thomas's boil and cooked with the eggs, and they were stuck fast. But then he heard Bill Ben's whistle. But it wasn't Bill's choice. It was Thomas gnashing his teeth. Mavis's owner was sent to be mended, so the Fat Controller made arrangements with Toby to work on her quarry due to the duty and take the trucks to the quarry. Toby remembered the good old days, and when he had to work at the harbor in the east. Anyways, the harbor has been busy, and Toby and his brothers were keeping and bustling about. But Toby never really had a chance to exercise his pistons properly. But one of these days, his crew had exciting news. Toby went to the shed at the big station. He was given a new paint, a new bell, and his brass work was polished until his driver could see himself in it. They set out for the junction where the branch line of the villages began. As they arrived, a tram came in the front at the beach. Each engine was younger than Toby, but he was dirty. His locks were clanked, and the steam leaked from everywhere. The station master agreed, so Toby was coupled in front. Soon they reached the seaside station, where the station master came out and met them. He was surprised to see Toby. He started forward and went away, shaking his head. The next day, Toby was excited. He woke up early and saw the sea sparkling from the distance, while the bird's wheels were swooping overhead, making a loud mewing noise. On Edward's branch line, the twins cannot stop teasing Thomas. Bill and Ben were exhausted, always made them fuss of them and took their photographs. Bill and Ben weren't worried. They kept urging their crews to polish them. The twins thought this was a huge joke. It was lucky that Edward and Thomas weren't there to hear it. At last, the day came, and the drivers and firemen agreed to give the engines an extra polish, and they were sparkling when Thomas arrived with the special train. Many of the entertainers had notebooks and almost had the cameras. Bill and Ben didn't know which way to look, but they loved it. Then, the visitors crept from the ride, either on Bill or Ben's cabs. Their cabs were low, and so the visitors forgot to duck, but they didn't seem to mind. Meanwhile, Star Tugs were working very hard in Elsbridge docks when Thomas arrived. The exhausted visit was almost over when a shunter came running up to the twins. And most of the visitors went to watch. Only one man stayed, and he had a camera which took instantly pictures. The photograph screwed his camera to a tripod and pointed at Bill. He turned and tapped with a hiss and a roar. Bill vanished with a cloud of steam. At that moment, the photographers pressed the button, and when the steam cleared, Bill was hurrying off to tell his twin. The photographer appeared from the corner from his in-state picture, looked at it, and threw it down in disgust. Quickly, The engines were coupled together. At last, the shredder princess I was lit off the mud and towards the engines and tugs gliding into the deep water. Bill's driver found a distant photograph, and on the floor, all there was a cloud of steam, with a very mingly Bill's photo. At the top, he showed it to Bill. Thomas was just bringing the entertainers home when he saw Edward, who was pulling trucks with a sort of tents of them, and they were especially for carrying China clays. The men called it hoods. At the Vicarage orchard, Trevor the tractor engine was feeling depressed. He couldn't breathe properly. Then the vicarage telephone rang, and the vicar answered and hurried out to see Trevor. When Trevor had a steam, they went to the farm and set to work in the field near the railway. Trevor was enjoying himself. The only thing he liked better is slaving logs and was giving children rides. His hunch happily as the pile of logs beside him grew. Then he heard Edward's whistle. Trevor was watching him, and so did not see one of the trucks. 6 from the end, 6 for junk and shutters. Paper flew, the truck's wheels jammed, and with a crack and a part broke, the last 6 trucks and a brakeman, the lurch bumped and stopped. The guard blew his whistle, but Edward didn't hear. Thankfully for Trevor was closer to the brakeman. Then Edward heard a whistle and looked back to see the trucks laying at the straight angle. The guard went to point to the train. The fireman went into the farmhouse to telephone for help. And Mario, a scrumbugger beat, and Little Ditcher arrived to clear up the mess. That evening, the factotum came to see Trevor. The next morning, at Big City Porch, Captain Star, Captain Zero give Z-Stacks jobs. Meanwhile, at the far car yards, Percy was shunting when the station master came up. At Elsbridge Docks, Bolster was being rude to the trucks. Izzy's gone with the warrior, and Nemi were feeling quite annoyed. Top Hat and Big Man arrived and see an empty Bolster. When Percy arrived, Bolster was sulking, and the trucks were annoyed with him. But the trucks were being careless, and as Percy was lined up to them, they burst through some buffers. It took them a long time to clear up the mess. Then Edward puffed with Captain Star, Percy watched as water towed Bolster to the beach. Percy returned to see Terence had all the shunting in the yard. The engines remembered Trevor and had to admit that Terence was right. Soon the storm strayed. Bill and Ben and his crew looked gloomy. While Bill arranged the empty trucks, Ben prepared to leave with a full once at the drain. He found that the water was leveled with the top of the rails. He was half ready for the wrist tie when it wiped into a huge wave of the wind slapped across the line. But it was too late. Ben was stranded in the middle of the drain with the last coat of sea oil lapping his wheels. Percy rushed to tell Thomas about Ben. Then Big Mac arrived.